Great, and good morning. Sorry, that's a little bit of a trailer there about what the Bristol Housing Festival is. We're conscious sometimes explaining our role and what we do is not forward. So we thought as we welcomed you to our BHF quarterly this morning, we'd just start a little trailer. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's great to have you along. I'm Jess Sweetland, the project director of the Bristol Housing Festival, and we're going to have some time this morning to give you a short update on some of the projects that are moving within the city. Myself and Jessie, Wilde, my co-director, will be doing that. And then I'm thrilled we've got with us two guests this morning. Phil Stott from YTKO, who's going to be talking about a particular part of the Innovate UK project that we're involved in called Consulting Modern Methods. And I'm delighted as well that we've got Councillor Tom Reynard with us this morning, who's going to be talking a little bit about his vision and hopes for the city. He's the newly appointed cabinet member for housing deliverance in the city. So you are really welcome this morning. And at the end of that, I'm hoping we'll still have some time for some questions and answers. I want today to be quite informal. Ordinarily, we'd like to be doing this with you in person. Obviously, for various reasons, we can't do that, but I'm hoping you'll have an opportunity to join in and feel very much part of today's events. So without further ado, we'll make a start because we've got quite a bit to get through this morning. So what I wanted to do is give you...
Just really quickly before you carry on, just let everybody know that we are being recorded this morning. So if you do want to be not be on screen or not be recorded, and the aim is to put this session out on YouTube afterwards for people that haven't been able to come. So if you don't want to have your face anywhere, please do turn off your camera and keep yourself muted. We've also disabled your ability to unmute yourselves just for now, just to avoid any kind of dogs in the background and that kind of thing. But as we get to Q&A, if you could put your questions in the box as we go, and as we get to the Q&A at the end, if you'd rather just raise a hand, we can give you permission to unmute yourself to ask your question. But just for now, just so you're aware, it's not your broken computer. We've taken control of that. Sorry, Jez, over to you.
No, thank you. Good point. People will be struggling otherwise. So thanks for that. Always good to get the logistics of the meeting done. One of the things that you may be aware of if you've been following some of our story over the last sort of 2-3 years is one of the projects that we're really pleased to be working on is this Innovate UK project, enabling housing for inclusive growth. And again, Phil Stott, who's going to be speaking later, is the project lead for that with YTKO. And we're at an exciting stage of that project where we're starting to see homes that have been part of that innovation, part of that testing, part of that R&D actually being built. So Z-Pods, some of you will have seen, has been built and is now occupied. Schemes like Booklook and Legal and General Modular are very much on site. But in particular, we just wanted to highlight and sort of celebrate the progress of Ecomotive with this snug home that has been built. And we're really thrilled about this, not least because it's MMC, it's highly sustainable, it's now being utilised and it's been occupied through Bristol City Council, but it's a very different expression of MMC. It's very much a community involved activity, and crucially, of course, it's about recognising that as that MMC supply chain develops, we think it's so important that we have that full spectrum of suppliers. So here is a local SME, Ecomotive, working in the city, creating jobs, etc. So we're just really thrilled and wanted to send our congratulations. If you want to know more about that project, if you go to the Ecomotive website, there's a virtual tour which will give you a lot of information about actually what they've done and how they've built that, and also to recognise again, congratulations. And they've won, I think, now 3 awards already for this first home they've built, including the William Sutton Prize for placemaking and affordable housing. So congratulations to Ecomotive, and we're thrilled to see this first snug in the city. Jessie.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Jez. So as Jez said, the Innovate UK project, which Phil and YTK are leading on, have got a number of demonstrator sites that we've mentioned before in these quarterly meetings, and you can see much more of the kind of detail of each of those on our website if you're interested. But just to give you a few updates on some of them, there's obviously things moving on many of them. There are 9 under that project, and there's also sites that aren't part of the Innovate UK project that the Bristol Housing Festival are working on as well, that things are happening left, right and centre. But I've just picked out 4 to give you a kind of flavour of some of the things that have happened in the last quarter. So the one on the top left there is a site on Romney Avenue, and the bottom left is down kind of in Knoll West in an area called Inns Court. And both of these, as schemes working with modular partners under the Innovate UK project, have gone through the first stage of public consultation, which is really, really exciting. And actually that you can see more of the details of those schemes as they're coming forward, and we're getting kind of comments back on those that the architects are then taking on board. They're both schemes that are at the moment being led by Bristol City Council for that public consultations. They're kind of collating all the feedback and the comments, and we're excited to see what those look like as they move forward. Then top right, this is a computer graphic of Booklook on the Brook, which is on Airport Road, down again in the south of the city, and that's going to be 173 homes. Now they've actually started on site now, which is brilliant, and we're looking at the first homes being completed in autumn, with hopefully, as long as there's no major delays or anything goes wrong, the actual final home should be completed in spring of 2022. So in terms of 173 homes being built out, this is happening really quickly, which is really exciting. Similarly, L&G Modular Homes are working in Lockleys on an area called Bonington Walk, and that's the image on the bottom right that you can see. And there are 185, I think it is, homes that again, they've started on site. So they've started doing the kind of site clearance, clearing out the fly tipping, starting to support the work ready for the houses to be built and go on site. What's really interesting about the Bonington Walk site with L&G is that this starts to speak into everything that we are really hopeful to see with these schemes. So it's not just about housing innovation and construction technologies, but it's actually about how those things support wider issues such as the climate crisis and the construction skills shortage and the biodiversity emergency that we're facing. And actually L&G, working with Bristol City Council and others, are looking like it's going to deliver a 4.5% net biodiversity gain on that site. So even with the houses being built, the biodiversity is going to go up, which is just an incredible achievement. So we're watching that really closely to make sure that, you know, to be able to evaluate and see that happens. But it is a really exciting prospect that can be done when housing is being built. The other one I just wanted to flag to you is Gap House. So Gap House is open for public consultation at the moment. This scheme actually made it into the Guardian newspaper last week and has hit Bristol Post and Bristol 24/7 in the last few hours as well. So again, really excited about this one. 9 homes in Horfield, highly sustainable, but looking at kind of providing key worker housing on a site that was disused. It was an old garage site. It was kind of falling into disrepair, again, issues with fly tipping and that kind of thing. So using odd strips of land that would never have been able to be used for housing before, and enabling MMC to come in as the solution to start to look at some of these pieces of land, so this is another one to keep your eye on. If you do have any comments, the public consultation is open. It's on the Bristol City Council website. So do get involved and go and put your comments on there. But part of what we do as the Housing Festival, as many of you know, is looking at actually how do we learn from all these different typologies, all these different sites, all these different types of MMC. How do we learn? How do we make sure that the council is capturing the learning, that we're helping them to capture that learning, the lessons that are being learned, and how do we share that and offer it around to other local authorities, social housing providers, etc., to make sure that collectively actually we're learning these lessons and we can move forward, both addressing sustainability and all those other things, as well as looking at the options for housing. So we are constantly looking at ways that we can work with other local authorities to share some of that learning. And we were delighted actually to have been involved in a piece of work with UK GBC and a company called Future Ground, run by Nick James, working for Enfield Council on their Meridian Water Scheme. So this is a huge scheme in Enfield near London. And it is looking at, they've got a really, really ambitious sustainability goal for this site. So what we were able to do as part of our work with them was provide case studies. You can sort of see in this Miro board, which you can find online. This is on our website, and you'll be able to kind of click into it and zoom right in and see all the details and stuff. It's a very clever way of presenting information. But you can see kind of the launch pad scheme right in the middle there towards the bottom right. And we've been able to share some of the lessons learned from Bristol Council, from Bristol Housing Festival, and case studies on those different projects, which it's just, for us, that's a really great way where we can start to share some of these learnings and share some of the lessons so that it actually can be taken forward by other local authorities as well. Jez.
Yeah, thanks, Jessie. And I think one of the things as well I wanted to just get across today was that the ambition for the festival has always been, how can we create a kind of think and do tank environment, partnering across the city, and of course to really unlock that culture of innovation, that ecosystem of innovation, of which we think MMC is a part, but it's obviously not the only part. We're also trying to go, as it were, upstream and look at some of those systemic challenges. How do you stimulate innovation? How can you enable a new supply chain of homes for the UK, but where the values that underpin that are very much around that sustainability and that community focus. It's not just how do we get units, but thinking much more about that cultural well-being. Perhaps one of the questions that drives us is that outcome-led procurement process. How do we ensure that the housing that we're building is improving the mental and physical health of the population and the sustainability of the planet? And within that space, there are some quite interesting ways that we're engaging using some of these 9 innovation sites in Bristol. So that's the sort of think and do tank, but then also thinking about the lessons learned from that. How can we affect policy? How can we affect that supply chain? And just to give you a quick flavour about a few of the things going on there, Phil Stott, again, under the Innovate UK project, will speak a little bit in a minute about constructing modern methods. And for us, that's a really important outcome of the Innovate UK project, looking at procurement, looking at enabling local authorities and housing commissions to really understand this emerging market and how we drive zero carbon sustainability as that and social value as part of that tool of delivery. We've also been working quite closely with WECA. One of the things I'm aware of as we talk about post-COVID-19 Build Back Better agenda, we talk about the need to think about local industrial strategy. Well, how might it be that modern methods of construction can start to play a positive contribution into that for the region? And so we're engaging with WECA, looking at that opportunity about stimulating that demand-led aggregation across the region. We're also engaging with MHCLG through their MMC task force that the national government announced recently, and sharing some of the learning that's happening both in Bristol and across the region here. So those become part of, I suppose, that broader policy context, all aware that for a lot of authorities, while this future home standard is being consulted on, actually there's urgency. We need to be really driving that sustainability and that pace of delivery, in my opinion now, because of the human need and the sustainability need. We can't just always wait for national legislation to catch up. And obviously working within Bristol in the context of that climate and ecological emergency and strategy that is emerging. And the final thing to mention in this space is the partnership that we are working on now with Nesta and UN Habitat. So we worked with Bristol One City and we applied for this Smart Cities Climate Challenge. And within that, what we have presented is the kind of, as it were, the challenge is how can you start to think about delivering better quality, more sustainable homes, and also understanding how we retrofit a lot of the existing social housing stock as a significant contribution, positive contribution to our climate challenge in the city. And within that, we're now scoping out that with UN Habitat and with Nesta and with the council and other stakeholders in the city to think about, well, how we'll actually frame that competition. And I think what's important for us is that we realise a big part of this is economic. So some of this might be looking again at, well, what's the data that we need to be getting so that we can really challenge the wisdom of longer term decision making in the economic cycle, that sort of how capital is utilised and how outcomes are secured. So we're excited about shaping that competition and also then using that to showcase again what the region and what Bristol is doing, because that competition is we're one of 4 cities. The other 3 are, from memory, in Colombia and Brazil and Uganda. So we're the only European city. This will be formally announced at the International Expo in Dubai in October, I believe. So there's quite a bit of work we're doing on that now. We'll have more to say, but I think what we wanted to show today is there is this growing opportunity to bring the city together, and then using one city as that place to bring those partners and that governance together. So we'll have more to say about that, but driving climate, driving the sustainability challenge, and how MMC can be used as a force for good in that space is a really important part of what we want to engage in the coming months.
Thanks,
Jessie. Next slide, please.
Just the final thing really to flag from Jez and I before we move on to others here is that we generally have an expo in October. You see some photos here from ones where we were actually used to be able to meet in person, as well as the virtual one from last year. And we are starting to plan our October Expo for this year, which is looking like it's going to be virtual. But this is basically a flag to say save the dates. So it's going to be between the 11th and the 22nd of October this year, and more information is going to be coming up on our website in the next possibly days, but probably next week or so. So do save those dates. It's the 11th to the 22nd of October, and watch this space for more information. We'll put it out all over our social media and stuff when we have that. But if you did want to get involved, if you want to get in touch and be part of that, maybe as a sponsor, or you think there are things that we should be showcasing as part of that expo that are going on across Bristol and the west of England, that are really good news stories in housing for Bristol, then we'd love to hear from you. So do get in touch with us at all the normal email addresses. If you haven't got ours directly, you can find the kind of general one on the website. So do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Jez.
Yeah, I'm just appreciating that horrific Zoom screenshot there of me. Thanks for that. Yeah, so there's ways for you to stay connected. Obviously, for us, we very much want the festival to be the city's housing festival, and so we are wanting also to celebrate good news, particularly in the areas of where we're looking at improving that engagement communities, where we're seeing sustainability and the quality of homes. So please do stay in touch, and please share your stories with us, where we can celebrate into the city these opportunities to showcase really good news, because I think, you know, that there is progress, there are exciting things to celebrate, and we need to make sure those also get bandwidth within the city to create that sense of hope and confidence that things are progressing in the right direction. It's my pleasure now to introduce Phil Stott to you, who's going to be presenting. We've had the joy working with Phil Stott very closely over the last couple of years, and working with YTKO as the Innovate UK project lead, and Phil Stott is the head of sustainability and construction at YTKO, and has been doing a fantastic job leading a difficult sense of a broad consortium of partners on the YTKO bid, and is going to speak to us now a bit about one of the particular outcomes of that project. So Phil, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hiya. Thanks for that intro, Jez. And obviously, I never said difficult consortium, a very broad consortium of partners. Yes, absolutely. So working with Jez and Jessie in the Housing Festival has been fantastic over the last few months, and obviously we've known each other and worked alongside each other for a few years now. Being given this platform, this opportunity, I just wanted to sort of provide a bit of a context and a little bit of an update on how the project's going. And as we come towards the end of the project, which finishes in October, we really sort of sharpens the mind and make sure that we have good, realistic, tangible outcomes, which will help deliver, you know, hopefully some impact. I can't stand projects which don't actually change anything. And what's more, with R&D projects, research and development projects, you can get projects which absolutely fail. For me, that's not really an option. When you've got taxpayers' money behind you, you absolutely have to make sure you change something, that you move something along and you've developed the conversation. And when we have 9 different housing providers who all are doing innovative stuff in MMC, there's a real chance that you can actually come a cropper and things can't change. But I'm very pleased to report that things have moved on. Jez mentioned those 9 MMC providers who we're working with, from the large to the small, all have real sites that are really building housing, and all are changing things and developing things. He mentioned the UK GBC, the UK Green Building Council, in their update. I think it was Jessie mentioned that. And actually, it's great to see that with this strive towards zero carbon affordable homes, we're able to demonstrate real changes there. So we have, you know, 9 partners there who've all looked at their carbon footprints for their MMC developments, looked at ways that they can incorporate air source heat pumps, that they can incorporate renewable technologies. And each of those changes makes a real difference, because, you know, they're able to deliver MMC housing, which is got a great envelope. It's got a great opportunity in terms of its carbon footprint, in terms of its efficiency of the building envelope. But also, what's more, is it's got the innovation around its renewable technologies as well, so that you're seeing these houses being sort of future-proofed as well. In terms of the other 2 major outputs from the project, Jez has sort of alluded to this idea of CMM, Constructing Modern Methods, which is the brand that we're putting out. And really the point that output was tackling was the need for local authorities, housing associations, registered providers, to be able to expedite their processes in order to get this stuff out. There's a lot of chat around an MMC sort of market that would only be realized if we were to give them thousands and thousands of opportunities and housing developments. Because if anyone knows anything about manufacturing and the processes that are required, even if you look at how cars are built or how other large-scale automated manufacturing processes work. They say they need lots of scale in order for those big factories to gear up and deliver at that scale, which therefore creates lovely low costs and makes those houses affordable. What's really interesting out of the Innovate UK project is we're starting to see that that's actually not quite the case. There's a lot of demand for what we call a pattern book approach, which is whereby if you could get all these MMC providers to use the same stuff and deliver it in the same way, using the same factories, then you could get that scale. And that is a completely valid approach. However, what we're seeing is sort of slightly challenging thoughts to that model, whereby MMC providers are kind of quite precious about how they build things. They're quite sort of, rightly commercially sort of aware that these systems, these processes they've invested a lot of time, love, heart, sweat, blood and tears into developing, they want to make sure that they're protected and that they work in a commercial environment on their own. And so with this project where we brought together 9 potential competitors who are all working really, really sort of for the greater good together, we're seeing actually opportunities whereby they can work on smaller sites, they can work flexibly, they can work on infill sites like the one that Jez has mentioned with BDP. And what we're seeing is actually the problem's not so much on the manufacturer side. They're really, really good at building houses. They're really good at constantly pushing themselves and innovating. The slight problem, if there is a problem, is maybe on the client side, on how we buy stuff. And for me, I think that that's really where we need to put the focus as energy. So working with Bristol City Council, who are the brave pioneers in this space, the Bristol Housing Festival alongside them, we found the issues really come down to procurement, they come down to legal, they come down to contracting, they come down to the process, the way things are done, and trying to change all of that so it's more efficient, more logical, it protects risk. And so we launched this toolkit, this digital toolkit, which is called CMM. And this digital toolkit basically takes all of the benefits, all of the pros and cons in the market, and puts it in a really nice, accessible way so that you're able to very clearly sort of option here against your specific strategic needs from a client's point of view. Basically, it puts confused.com for the MMC marketplace. It gets all that data into one place. And that helps tackle risk, because if there's one problem that is actually inhibiting the MMC marketplace, it's risk. People are concerned about the building housing in a different way to what has been done with, for the last, 70 years in basically the same traditional build structures. So we're saying, do it all differently, work with new people you've not worked with before. I mean, that's another thing that's not really been considered, is that actually most MMC providers aren't your, Travis Perkins, Keep Moat, Wilmot Dixon, Vistry, traditional build construction companies. They're having a look at it and they're working with the supply chains. But on the whole, you've got new people like legal in general. I mean, I'm pretty sure they did insurance before anything else. So what we're finding is actually the MMC marketplace is entirely new and untrusted. And actually what's great about the MMC marketplace is that they're just the sorts of people who should be trusted. These are the innovators, these are the developers, these are the people who are trying to take housing and raise the standards for all of their supply chain and all of the housing that they're delivering. So we're really hopeful that going forward with things like the CMM Digital Toolkit, we're able to bring that data and build that trust, that certainty, and those robust processes to unlock the MMC marketplace. And to be honest, I think it's more important than factories at the moment that we do this work. The innovation and enablement model work that Jez and Jessie are working on at the moment with the Bristol Housing Festival and Bristol City Council is also really important. It helps sort of build cultures and processes which bring everyone together so that you don't end up with housing, not talking to procurement, not talking to environment, not talking to energy. And it's great to have Tom here today because it sort of allows us to very quickly jump on him and show him this work that we're doing. So that hopefully that going forward in the likes of Bristol, but also around WECA and what's more around the other combined authorities like CPCA and the West Midlands Combined Authority and the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, that we're seeing sort of good learning in-house as well as asking the market to come up with the solutions all the time. And I think that learning those refined processes should really help expedite the delivery of MMC housing, because housing's facing sort of 3 main challenges at the moment. One is around planning. One is around it's not green enough, And the third one is around sort of the availability of speed. You know, can we get housing up quicker? We've got thousands of families and thousands of people on the waiting lists. It's absolutely sort of acceptable that housing takes as long as it does to get up. And so for us, MMC, the one thing it does do really well is deliver housing quickly. And through projects like that we're doing with Innovate UK, we're able to sort of tackle those challenges and overcome those barriers to be able to unlock housing at speed, at pace. We're able to tackle that green challenge by getting houses built with less environmental impact, with more. I mean, it's great about the wildlife and the wilderness stuff that Jessie was mentioning earlier, but it's also about performance. It's about making sure houses aren't leaky, making sure they don't have damp problems, making sure they don't have all those sort of exciting things that I talk about all the time, like thermal bridges, and making sure they've got the environmental renewable technologies embedded in them to undertake that. And then when we get inside the council and we work with the local authority processes and structures and guidelines, we can tackle that planning issue as well, because they're just changing everything on planning over the next 2 years. So for me, there's sort of a triple threat of housing that we're slowly trying to tackle all together. The last thing I wanted to very quickly mention, conscious I've got a minute, is the work we're doing with the SWPA. The West of England is great in how it's stepping forward. We've got £1.1 billion pipeline potentially of procurement opportunities. And what that means basically is there's a new dynamic purchasing system framework available with our partners with the Southwest Procurement Alliance. It will utilise the toolkit that's coming out of CMM, which will help, again, make that decision-making pathway simpler. It will get MMC providers in the shop window more often with local authorities. It will help local authorities shop that window of MMC providers. Basically, we're like a big dating agency. The contract notice is live at the moment. It's just gone live this week. So please, if there's any MMC providers out there who want to get involved, please do jump on that link. It's on Pro Contract. I think my colleague Lisa might have just dropped it very helpfully into the chat. If not, I will definitely drop it into the chat during Tom's piece. And please do take that opportunity to get involved, because this project, it was only 18 months, but to be honest, the impacts and the things that it's tackling in social value and housing could be felt for many, many years going forward. So yeah, it's definitely worth getting involved with it and then having a look at. Thanks, Jez. I'll hand back to you.
Phil, thank you very much. And obviously, you know, we'll follow up with people and share links as well, and encourage people, if you want to find out more about constructing modern methods. It's very live, it's very current. It's a co-design project with working with BCC as well. And we're hoping it will, again, be part of that systemic unlocking of different ways of working and creating really good solutions for our housing in our city and across the region. So thank you, Phil. It's my pleasure now as well to introduce Councillor Tom Reynard. Tom, we're so grateful for you finding time to come and join us today. I'm aware, you know, you're relatively new in post, and I'm aware that there's a huge amount of information for you to digest. So thank you for making time to come and just share a little bit about your first insights and some of your ambitions and hopes for the city as you take up that cabinet role. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Jez, and hello everyone. Thank you for having me along today. I'm going to just give a brief bit of background for those of you that kind of probably don't know as much about me, because some of you I have worked with in the past. Bristol has been my home for the Greater Bristol area since I've been at the other side of the border for about 13 years. Having first come here as a student, and Bristol's a really popular destination for students that want to stay on after they finish their university degree, and I was no exception in that regard. During my time, I've worked in a sort of fairly senior roles. I was the Vice President of Community and Welfare for my Students' Union, representing over 30,000 students, I think it was at the time, working on housing issues from those student perspectives. And following on from that year where suddenly I had all this free time again, going to a 9-to-5 job, what else could I get involved in? And so there have been many other things, mainly around mental health and housing. I've set up my own charity called the Independent Mental Health Network, and it does a lot around co-production, co-producing, and getting people together to think about how do we build together, how do we change systems together, in that case in the mental health space. But I think it's a good thing to think about in whatever we're working in, because the only way we're going to deliver for Bristol as a council, as me as a cabinet member, is by us working in partnership, and by us also being able to have those difficult conversations that there are no doubt going to be about some of the frustrations that might be on the developer side, frustrations that might be on the local community side, but what are those opportunities for innovation, and how can we bring people with us as we take things forwards? One of the things about my housing campaigning, as some of you will be aware, I've been a long-standing member of an organisation called Acorn, who acts as a community union, and that really gave me a lot more insight into some of those perspectives and issues that there have been from the community side, particularly around the need for affordable housing. Housing is increasingly out of reach for more and more people trying to get onto the property ladder. Unless you're fortunate enough to be able to get help, it is increasingly hard to do so. And rents, as we know, are hugely increasing and rapidly rocketing up, without kind of an end to those rapidly rising increases in sight. My portfolio is massive, and so getting to grips with it has been a fun few weeks, and it will probably take me some time. But what I am keen to be is open and accessible, and make sure that people can have conversations with me, whether that's about individual projects they might be concerned of getting stuck in the pipeline, or maybe it might be wider scale, and talking about some of the really innovative stuff that's happening. And I'm really excited to be listening to both what Jez and Phil have been talking about today, and some of the opportunities there within modern methods of construction. The portfolio is everything from housing delivery, major development schemes, modern methods of construction, social housing, landlord services, homelessness, the home choice system, tackling issues around gentrification, university development, self-builds, retrofit, estate renewal, the private rented sector, building a living rent city, the housing strategy, and think about land and property allocated for housing development. So there's going to be competing priorities all the time, but we know we need to get homes built, and we need to get the right homes built, and really adding a social value to the city that can help us address, you know, the challenges that we've got with over sort of 12,000 people on our waiting lists in terms of social housing, and thinking about, you know, the 900 plus families that are currently in temporary accommodation, although some of that is single people in temporary accommodation. And we all have a role to play. But for some of the things that I really see as the key ways forward, you know, innovation. You know, what are the ways that we can do things differently that are really going to add value to the city? What are those projects that we can take a managed risk approach on, and really kind of go, yeah, well, let's give this a go. No one else is doing it. We want to continue to be sector leading in Bristol, be that space, be that opportunity for us to test things, share what works, but then communicate those successes really well. Because I sometimes think we don't do that enough. I think there's been some really interesting article pieces, particularly around the Bell Close Gap House project, which police state is also in my ward, where I am the ward councillor. So a keen interest from that perspective too. And it's great to see it already in the press. But then what about when that's delivered? You know, ensuring that we're telling that story, you know, families and people and individuals getting into housing, getting on the ladder, getting somewhere secure, a place to live, and ensuring that we're helping to bring people with us on that journey. We need to build a system that works for everyone. We need to look at some of the things that aren't working at the moment. And these might be like issues that some of you have kind of felt like you've talked about till you're blue in the face. But as I'm new in post, it's important I want to take the time to ensure I understand those issues, understand those perspectives, so that, you know, what we do is build effective partnerships, we build meaningful partnerships, we build continuous partnerships through that approach. You know, and really, I guess the key thing is a culture of delivery. We want to be a council that delivers. Now, I'm aware of, you know, before the current mayor Marvin took office in 2016, of some of the challenges there were around the housing pipeline, and you know, we'll continue to work to get that right, and look at, you know, where there are challenges with sites. Come talk to me. You know, I've already been having a couple of conversations with some individuals, and sort of then been asking questions internally about where is this, why is this stuck at this particular point. There's always many perspectives on those issues, but how can we unstick things quickly so we don't get caught up in a bit of a quagmire? For me, you know, delivering affordable housing has got to be at the forefront. You know, eco-friendly homes. You know, I think it was really good to hear about a scheme where there's going to be biodiversity net gain, and you know, where that's possible, it should be encouraged. We're facing a climate crisis, and one of the things that we have to really consider as a city is how we balance that alongside housing delivery. The current some ways of delivering housing can be quite carbon intensive. So what are we doing to ensure that we're addressing that and really thinking that through? for us, reducing people in temporary accommodation, reducing rough sleeping, again, taking a partnership approach. You know, I was really delighted at my first cabinet meeting yesterday, taking a paper already with proposals for a bid we're going to be putting into the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. We, you know, obviously don't know if that's going to be successful. If it is, you know, the total kind of pot it will unlock is 8 million, which will allow us to buy more homes that we can then support people with move on accommodation. Where are those partnership opportunities? What are those partnership opportunities that you know about? What is your offer? What is your ask from us as a city in terms of what you need? I think I've covered sort of about being open to having difficult conversations, and you know that's something that I will live by. I will always be open to listening. Also, I will push back where I feel it's appropriate to do so. It's important we're able to have robust conversations and really understand each other's perspectives, because that's how we're going to move forwards. And I think off the back of that, I think sometimes when there's some developments, and it can be a bit us and them, can't it, between communities and developers pitted against each other. How do we build a more collaborative environment where people feel like things are being done with them and not to them, which is often some of the frustrated, whether this is felt, you know, right or not, that comes from some communities. I think a couple of other things I'd highlight is for those of you that haven't kind of seen what was in our manifesto around homes and communities, I'd encourage you to check out some of those commitments. Obviously, we also have alongside that the One City plan. And you know, there's going to be some really key things that we're going to think about over the course of this year. One of the real challenges, and I guess also opportunities, is we'll be developing our 30-year business plan for the housing revenue account over the course of this financial year. And that's something that's going to be a lot of thought, because house building is one element within that, right? There's also things like retrofit, maintenance, estate regeneration. So what's the mix and the balance that we're going to pull together within that? What's the appetite for borrowing going to be, and how do we manage that appropriately when we have to consider potential changes in national government policy, as there was a few years ago, which then stopped, which then gave us a real issue around rent income that impacted the business planning process. Other opportunities, I think the Gap House project is a good one. The reason I quite like it, because we have a lot of disused garage sites across the city. So what could we be doing with those? What are those opportunities for perhaps more things like the Gap House sites, community land trusts, other things, other options, and really consider how we can do things better and really make the most of the land that we have. We've also got to do a debate, I think, as a city about density and height, and you know, what sacrifices are we prepared to make in terms of maybe building taller to allow us to get the density we need to address the housing crisis, and then perhaps in that way preserve more green space. There is a debate and a discussion for us to have as a city around that issue. There's also the role of WECA. What do we need from WECA? I think there's obviously been a change of administration there, so making sure we're thinking about the West Midlands Combined Authority, the role they can play. What were those pledges and promises and work things that were happening pre-election? You know, are those things still moving forward? And how can we ensure we have a joined up approach across the region? Because Bristol has been the tried and tested success bed for some of these projects that we're trying to move forward, particularly in the MMC space. You know, scale it up, think about the pipeline, think about the order book. As Phil mentioned, you know, those are often some of the challenges faced in the MMC sector at the moment, and we need to be bearing that in mind as much as we possibly can. And you know, I think some of the UN Habitat work that's happening, and again, you know, props to Jez and the team for those of you that have been involved in developing that work. It's awesome. I was really pleased to be able to attend part of the first kind of event the other week. And you know, I think if people really need to think creatively, let's think out of the box. What are the other things we could be doing, and the opportunities we could seize to unlock investment, and also to ensure that we're trying to kind of address the barriers that there might be to getting everything working that we need. And I think we know there are many challenges. We've set ambitious targets around our house building agenda, particularly around affordable housing. We want to make sure we can meet those, because you know, we want homes for the families that's currently stuck in accommodation they don't want to be in. And it's really important that we address that and think about, you know, when people want to build development in the city, what's the social value you are coming to add to the city, or is it just about the profit motive? So those would be my probably initial reflections and some of my priorities. I hope that gives you a bit of a flavour of where I'm at 4 weeks into the job, I think, to the day, with lots more to learn, a lot more to get to grips with. So thank you very much.
Oh, Tom, thank you. And that's great. Just, I mean, I think we're all, you know, conscious as you're speaking about the breadth of the role and the complexity of it. As you know, you alluded, there's sort of the art of compromise and a lot of that. And we'll open up the session to some Q&A. But as chair, I'm going to take an opportunity just to pose a question to you straight off the bat, if I may. I mean, what struck me as you're speaking is, you know, there's the challenge of articulating that vision and that hope. There's then the sort of complexity of pulling apart all those different priorities and working out what you can, in reality, what you need to focus on. And I wondered if you've already got a sense of where you may start to see where some of those sort of immediate barriers lie. To sort of, here's the ambition, here's the opportunity. Where do you see, and have you yet got any sort of feel of where you think some of those initial urgent barriers that need to be addressed by, whether that's the council or building trust? I'm just, you know, and where they lie in the landscape. Have you got a sense of where some of your urgent time will go yet, or is that something you're still kind of feeling your way into?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I'd say is if people want individual time with me, just get in touch with me, and I'll do my best to kind of make time in the diary. I think some of the really urgent priorities are really understanding some of those challenges that I know have already come to me through a number of routes, around kind of some of the aspects of the planning process. Obviously, a lot of that's kind of tied up in that's the legal process. But what are the opportunities for us to think about how that's working or not? What are the touch points that we need to have? We have, you know, strapped resources within the council as well, and so how can we all make it work for everyone as well? So I think if there are frustrations coming forward, what's your solution? Bring the solution or an idea of a solution with the frustration that you may have if you're a developer that's like sitting on a site and wanting to get it built. And just make sure we have those conversations early, ideally as well, not at a point of you needed the answer yesterday. If we can see those things coming a bit ahead of time, that would be good. I think the other aspect of that is, whilst, you know, we as a council own a fair bit of land, a lot of the land is privately owned as well. So we have more control over the sites that we do own the land for, and more of a say over, you know, affordable housing delivery and targets within that. You know, depending on what part of the city you're in, you know, there are targets that within the affordable housing practice note range from sort of 20% to right up to 40%, because, you know, we need housing that's that people can afford, alongside, I think, the luxury living apartments that perhaps a lot of people want to build.
Thanks, Tom. Right, I'm going to throw it open, and if, as I think Jessie's put in the chat, do raise your digital hand, as it were, and we'll try and get around to a few people. Andrea, firstly, over to you. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? That'd be great. Oh,
okay. Someone needed to unmute me. Hello, how are you? Good? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Excellent. So I've been lucky enough to work on a couple of the housing festival sites which used MMC. But I just wondered whether there was a place for repurposing buildings as well to deliver housing, especially where we'll see buildings coming up in the city centre with changing retail, that kind of thing, to bring a different range of properties into the city centre that's not just kind of apartments and luxury homes that you talked about, and whether, thinking outside of the box, we need to look at repurposing, whether it's department stores or city centre sites as part of the solution.
I think potentially yes. I think all the ideas are welcome, and it's also about what's appropriate within the context. If I think about my ward of Manor Farm, it doesn't have a lot of service amenities, and it's got one little strip of shops and things. A couple of those have been turned into flats, and you know, they said, well, why couldn't we have had that for alternative use to ensure we maintain some amenity within the space? So I guess depending on what part of the city we're talking about, it's also going to be a different conversation. But yeah, definitely, I think just thinking about how we can adapt existing buildings is a really good thing for us to be thinking about.
I know it's going to be difficult in terms of making sure that they are energy efficient and that kind of thing. So I live in Bedminster near an old Victorian swimming pool that's closed, and it seems like a perfect location for redevelopment. And I know it's not easy to do that, but equally it's a brownfield site and sustainable location. I just think it's something that we need to explore, as well as gap houses, MMC, all those different options. But I'll let someone else ask a question now.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, do raise your hands for questions. A few were submitted actually before the event, so so I'm going to go to one of those now. So this is from one of the developers in the city, and I think this is an interesting challenge, Tom, to put in your intro, as it were, to understand. And I think there's always recognizing that there's probably two sides to some of these stories. But from a developer, the question that's been posed is one of our current experiences dealing with the council, and is it causing frustrations in terms of the delivery of pace of housing, is the inconsistent and slow engagement often that they experience, or they feel they experience, with City Design Group and the pre-app process. And their feeling is that that can cause major delays of delivery of new homes and really deliver, you know, and you talked a bit about making, I suppose, the council fit for purpose in terms of being enabling delivery. So I wondered if you could just speak into that, because I'm conscious that A, you're new in post, and B, there's always two sides to that story, but perhaps you could just give a feel of that in terms of the council's ambitions and what might be available as a response to that.
You know, I think it's a really good question, and I think I'd be really keen to meet with the developer in question, or a group of developers that are having that experience, so I can understand that more. I think ultimately we want to be an administration that's getting things done, and that means getting houses built and delivered, so that we've got homes, appropriate homes for people. And if there are things we need to look at that could improve those processes that are causing frustration, then always happy to do so. And I think, as you mentioned, there's two sides to every story, and it's really about trying to connect those perspectives so we can find the way forward that is, well, going to work for as many people as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm just looking, there's no other questions, so I've got a few other questions that were submitted in advance here. One of the questions here was, which I think is a really good one, you talk quite a bit about collaboration and you know, and the reality, I suppose, that you know, there's an awful lot of the city that the council is not responsible for. I mean, even the question with Andrea, some of those sites that may be appropriate for repurposing may not be within council ownership. So the question here was, what do you need from us as people engaged in the built environment, as people on this call that are engaging in housing delivery across the city? What is it that you would be sort of putting back to us? I mean, you talked about that solutions orientated approach. What is it that you would be putting to us to say, look, these are my priorities, this is how you can help really work within the city?
I think the first thing I say is, if there are particular ideas or particular sites that you think aren't on our radar, or you perhaps put on our radar and then nothing's been heard about since, you know, do prompt me, certainly as the new cabinet member, because I'm asking lots of questions at the moment, which you get to do, particularly in the first few months in a new role, right? And I love nothing more than asking questions. So I think it's really bringing those opportunities forward, those ideas. I think no idea is, you know, too stupid. You know, might as well think creatively. We're going to have to, if we're going to get more affordable housing built in the city and reach those targets of getting up to 1,000 a year. I think the other thing I would say is also have a think about what's your approach to community engagement. There's what you need to do to tick a box, and then there's good practice. And I think it's always worth that being bearing in mind, even if that requires a little bit more resource. It may save you some aggro down the line. I think, you know, doing with communities, it's certainly been my experience in the mental health space, is doing with communities is always going to lead to a better outcome, even if it's a bit more of a complicated process than if you kind of do two or do four, because you know, then that's when resentment can build, and it can get then frustration when you're then on site doing the development and you're feeling like, well, they're just complaining because they didn't want it there in the first place, and maybe that's true, but you know, what's happened to kind of get to that point in the first place. So I think really thinking through how you're engaging and bringing communities with you with some of these ideas is really important too.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think one of the things that we're seeing, and I'm sure this is the experience on as it were all sides, is that, you know, housing is so politically alive, isn't it? And the sites that whether it's council owned or other sites, often they're now You know, we're talking about the density issues, you're talking about the green space issues, that it's so alive. And so how can we work together to really build that healthier consultation? And I sometimes feel the narrative gets lost in terms of, you know, it's almost we're playing off a different need against urgent need, and we kind of lose the story. And one of the things that I think is so important is that we learn how to build that understanding of the story that's behind a development, and you know, recognizing that there needs to be compromise, but we can do it really well. And I would love to, you know, think about ways that we can, you know, improve consultation, but also improve people's understanding that not all development is bad. You know, that there's ways of using green spaces responsibly, and looking at well-being and the rest of it. So yeah, I think that's a key part. And actually, just on that, I wonder if you could just speak to this, that one of the things that we're so aware of is in the festival is traditionally, if you look at national press, what we tend to see is housing stories are negative. You either have an incompetent local authority that somehow allowed some sort of horrendous planning consent to go through and the community up in arms, or you tend to have a kind of, you know, an evil developer who is, you know, not delivering any affordable housing, whatever else. That's the kind of focus of the press. And I think it creates quite a toxic environment for then good things to happen. So I wondered if, you know, I think I alluded to this earlier, one of the things we're trying to do within the festival is create this platform to actually showcase and celebrate where progress is being made, where good news is being made, and in an attempt to actually reassure people that there are good things happening. Of course, for a lot of the general public, unless they happen to stumble past a development site, they may not know about it because they're not, like a lot of us, reading the built environment press. You know, it's very much what's in the more general news. So I just wondered if in your, you know, you're 4 weeks in, I wonder if you could share some good news with us. Is there something you've seen or read about outside of what we've talked about so far, where you've read it and gone, actually, that's a good piece of news that's happening in the city, in housing, that I'm proud of, and I don't think it's yet got the attention it deserves? Or maybe it's more about, this is something that's happening in the city that has huge potential for good, and we need to really all get root behind it so that we can help create that landing space for it, that people understand the nuance and complexity behind it. So I just wondered if you've got anything like that you wanted to share. And maybe you haven't, and I've set you up.
No. I think it's a really good question, isn't it? Because the thing is that communicating those good news stories where we're developing, you know, really strong, innovative approaches is really important, and not enough of that comes through. I think Cllr has been a really interesting one. It's been picked up by the national media in a relatively kind of positive light, which is amazing and really good to see. And so, you know, us really making sure we're telling that story and getting those good news stories out there is going to be really important. And how is it making a difference to people's lives? You know, that's the thing that I think we always need to be answering as a question. How are we making a difference to people's lives by these developments that are going up? And Cllr is a really good example. There's a range of kind of approaches being explored, you know, potentially key workers and other things are being thought about there. And so it's make sure that we've got a really strong story to tell, so that, you know, it's more interest perhaps to the media. I think, you know, obviously we're all going to think the awesome stuff we're doing is really interesting, but then trying to kind of capture the attention of the media can be really challenging. I think there have been some other good news stories though. I think within the last week, you know, I'm thinking about Legal & General and Temple Island, and, you know, £350 million investment is going to go into there, which will include I think it's 550 homes. Correct me if I've got that wrong. So a couple of developments in my head, a fair bit of which will be affordable. I think there's also our local basketball team as well, and you know, a proposal that's going forwards there. So, you know, I think there is a lot happening, and there is a lot happening in the city. There is a lot getting done, which I think is really good. And it's really about how do we tell that story effectively, and how do we ensure that we really do celebrate the good news and then learn for the things that perhaps haven't gone as well. And if the bad press is often what's being picked up, is there something we could have done differently with the approach that was taken?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think that's very interesting, and thank you for that. And I love the point there, just to reflect on for us all. I think that perhaps we're very good at focusing on the story of the buildings, but actually, of course, for the more general public and that consultation, it's who are the people that will benefit, who are the people that will be impacted, how are the communities that are going to be created can help people thrive. It's sort of bringing it back to people, not just buildings, isn't it, as part of that consultation. Right, we've got time for one more question. I'm going to hand over to Richard Clark. Richard, you will be unmuted, and I will leave you to speak directly to Tom. Richard could be unmuted.
Thank you. Really exciting to hear of the breadth of things that are happening. Perhaps one of the really positive stories that we really ought to focus on is how Bristol as a city has really embraced sustainability in terms of energy, the whole carbon agenda. We touched on the revision to Part L, and that is going to be directly relevant. We've got a couple of really good examples. We've got the district heating network in Bristol, which is actually a fantastic piece of engineering, but actually very few people really know anything about it. The fact that there's going to be miles of slinkies sitting in the bottom of the harbour and the Cut and other such places, it's really exciting stuff. And leading on from that, we've found as something to celebrate. We've just completed a small housing scheme in Totterdown, and despite all the advice of a number of the agents, we've achieved EPC A rating on all of the houses, and we are already binning the gas boiler. We're using air source heat pumps and the likes. And what was really interesting was that the lenders and the advisors were all very skeptical about that in terms of its cost and its saleability. The really good news and something to celebrate is we sold the whole lot off plan and at a price that actually recovered the entire investment in the additional technology. And part of that, and this is the final point, was we had some really good publicity material which compared the running cost of a traditional Victorian house, a standard new home built to current building regulations, and those of an EPC A rated. And it was that simplicity that scored the goal. And it is that same problem with planning. Planning has become so unbelievably complex. When we submit planning applications now, the volume of studies and reports we submit, we know quite often aren't even read by the council themselves. So how do the public ever have a chance of understanding it? So there's some great news and one or two things that would be really good to publicise.
Tom, I'm going to give you a minute to respond and then we're going to try and wrap up, but thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I think there is some really innovative stuff happening, particularly around the environment, and I think district heating networks is an excellent example. As is the air source heat pumps as well. And so, and I think this is, you touched on it towards the end there around kind of like the banks and other things being a bit nervous about sort of supporting some of this stuff because it's new, and how do we create that culture of innovation and get those people on board, because particularly things like modern methods of construction, the potential to get more houses delivered a lot quicker is huge, to high quality. You haven't got to sacrifice quality through MMC just because you're delivering quicker. It can be as high quality, if not better. And so we really need to be thinking about that, thinking about the environmental standards of the homes that are being built, and their EPC ratings. I think is really important too. It's going to be the tension about housing and environment. We need to get that right, and we need to make sure we get that right as a city, and that we work with neighbourhoods and communities as part of that, and ensure that we're not just chucking houses in left, right and centre, that there's also amenity and services that people need within those communities too.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I just want to say thank you so much to you for making time to come and join us for this event today. I know you're, like you say, 4 weeks in post, so thanks so much for taking questions. Phil, thank you so much also for coming and talking a little bit, giving us a bit of an update on CMM and some of the work that you are doing. But I just want to say before we close, thank you so much to everyone who asked a question, who submitted questions in advance, and for all of you for just coming and showing up and being interested in the work of the Bristol Housing Festival and what is going on in Bristol, in the city. But thank you so much for joining us. We will have another one of these in about 3-4 months time, something like that. So do watch our social media for that, and do save the dates for the Expo, which is coming in October. But thank you so much, everyone. It's been lovely to have you, and we will speak again soon. Bye bye.
Yeah, many thanks. Bye.